Welcome to part 2 of the second week of EMDD 101. In this video, I want to talk about the design thinking process. So I'm going to show 3 different processes that all are design thinking. 3 different models for the process of design thinking by 3 different practitioners. Well, actually, the third one is kind of like just a general, it's just kind of a general idea of design thinking, but there's different practitioners of design thinking kind of explain different ways of undertaking the process of design thinking. So we know design thinking asks us to use direct observation and real experience of the people who we're designing for or with. What do we do? Where do we start? What do we do after we've started? There's kind of some different ideas about what that might be, so I want to share just a few of those. And I guess my point here is to show that there's not just one process, right? Design thinking, again, it's a way of thinking. So different people have proposed different ways of applying that thinking step by step or by different processes. There's not one process that, again, it's wicked problems. There's no one solution that's the obviously right one. So these are sort of 3 different solutions to how we should conduct design thinking. So the first one is just a general concept of iterative design, and this comes from a number of authors. You see this all the time, so I haven't attributed it here because I made this just based on the general concept that you kind of see in a lot of places. And that process says that first we should start with requirements. So we should research the problem. So go find where the problem's being experienced and the people who are experiencing it, research them, come up with an idea of what they need, what features would help them solve this problem, what are some of the constraints, what are they capable of, not capable of, what do they like, don't like, that kind of stuff. And then we create design alternatives. Alternatives are just different potential solutions. So you come up with and brainstorm different ways of solving this problem and helping the user to achieve their goals and meeting the requirements that you came up with in the previous step. So you might come up with 3 or 4 different potential solutions. And then you're going to prototype those somehow. So you're going to draw them, sketch them, make a clickable prototype. We're going to look more closely at prototypes later in this course. But you make some prototypes, so you make it real and try to make something that demonstrates the solutions. And then you go back to the people who are experiencing the problem and you have them try to use the prototypes and test the ideas and see if any of them solve the problem better than the others or at all. Sometimes none of them solve the problem and you got to start back over at requirements. So that's sort of the general iterative design process. There's another model. I almost had you read the paper for this, but there's a lot of readings this week, so I cut it out because it's not the most important reading for this week. But this is a model that I absolutely love. Maybe make my little face smaller and out of the way. There we go. It's called the Analysis Synthesis Bridge Model. So if you're interested in it, you can Google that by Hugh Dubberly and his team. And in this version of the design thinking process, the suggestion is that we kind of start in the real world and we observe, and then we hop over into the kind of future thinking world. So we start with the problem and what exists today, the world as it exists now. Kids have tiny toothbrushes that are adults design toothbrushes but smaller. That's how it is today, and let's imagine a better future. Wow, what if kids could hold it better? That sort of thing. So we go out and we figure out what's going on now, and then we envision a brand new world. And the steps for that are to start by doing research and observing and doing surveys, interviews, these kinds of things about the current world. Let's go do a survey of little kids and find out how often they're actually brushing their teeth. And then let's do a survey of dentists. Let's go talk to some dentists for little kids and find out if there's common problems that little kids are experiencing when they brush their teeth. Let's go talk to parents. Hey parents, what's so hard about getting your kids to brush their teeth? That sort of thing. And then once you've done that research, you create a model. So you look for the themes among what you learned and the patterns, and then you try to come up with solutions. So you brainstorm solutions and you kind of look at the patterns of what's existing now and you try to make them better to solve the problem. And then you prototype and you make a real version of that idea. So in this design thinking model, you start in the bottom left and you actually just go around in a circle. So once you do your research, you kind of come up with the themes and the patterns, you come up with ideas to solve the problem, you make the ideas, then what do? You go put them in the real world and you end up back here. So that becomes the new reality because you've made the potential solutions. So now you introduce those, so take your toothbrush and you go give it to the kids that you talked to before and you see if things got better. So I really like this one because it's circular and it's just easy to follow, I think. But actually, in your reading this week with Tim Brown, who is one of the sort of preeminent scholars and designers of the design thinking field, he has another way of thinking about the process that I also really like, and I think it's really important for everybody to know because it's kind of like, this is the design thinking guy, and this is what he thinks that we should be doing. This is his proposed process. And what I like about Tim Brown is he's basically saying that it's not really a process that goes from start to finish. You don't do step 1, then step 2, step 3, step 4. He says there's just different spaces you might be in. First, inspiration, you gotta find a problem and then you learn about the problem. Go observe the people who are experiencing the problem and talk to them about the problem. And then you might do ideation. Okay, great, we feel like we learned enough about the problems, we understand it, let's come up with some solutions. Let's go to the people experiencing the problem and work with them to come up with solutions and come up with these prototypes and just kind of try things out. And then you going the wrong direction. Then implementation, as you're going through ideation and you're trying things out, see which ideas work the best, and of the ideas that work the best, make them real. And his point is that you don't really have to do this in a circle. You can go any direction, you can go across things. If you are working on ideation and you're getting stuck and you really can't come up with solutions, maybe you don't understand the problem as well as you thought you did. So maybe you go back to the inspiration way of thinking. And so his suggestion is that we don't box ourselves into steps. We don't feel like we have to do step 1, step 2, step 3. If you get to implementation and it's just not working and you're like, I could solve this problem so much better than what this implementation is doing, that's okay. Go back to inspiration, go back to ideation. He suggests that we bounce around between all of these different approaches and ways of thinking, and that it's really not important that we do things step by step, as long as we do all of these things in design thinking, as long as we are exploring the problem, as long as we are coming up with ideas, and as long as we are implementing those ideas. It doesn't really matter what order we do them in. I'm a big believer in this, which is why in this class, when you undertake assignments and design activities, especially on your final project, go out of order. Turn something in, and then if you realize 2 weeks later you should have done it a different way, go back and do it a different way. The important thing is that you solve the problem, not that you follow the steps. So that's what Brown is getting at. The important thing is that we work with the people experiencing the problem to solve it, not that we do it in a certain method. The next section, the next video, I'm going to talk about some of the basic elements of design thinking.